Welcome to Actualize, a podcast focused on the intersection of performance, ambition, and mental health. I'm your host, Rob Pintwala. My goal for the show is to not only celebrate success, but also shed light on the challenges and sacrifices that come with ambition. Actualize is brought to you by First Session. Launched in 2019, I started First Session to help you find the right therapist. First Session is purposely designed more like a dating website than a clinical website, as we're completely focused on helping you find the right fit the first time. My team and I interview and vet our partner therapists, so you can simply browse videos, see who you vibe with, and instantly book a session. Check us out at firstsession.com and see why more than 7,000 Canadians have chosen First Session to find a therapist.
Today's episode is with Jason Silver. Jason is the father of 2 boys, and he has founded multiple companies. He was fortunate to play a role helping to scale Airbnb in its earlier days. He currently spends his time coaching and advising other founders and their teams on how to build great, lasting businesses that people love working for. Jason lost his sister in 2019, and that forced him to change his relationship with work. He went deep on productivity, mindfulness, neuroscience, and behavioral psychology. Through a lot of personal experimentation, he found a way to get balance back into his life without sacrificing his impact at work. Jason's mission is to help people find ways to enjoy doing hard things in their own lives, and his hope is that by distilling down years of trial and error into specific, actionable lessons, people will be able to get more back into their own life while still having a big impact at work as well. In this episode, we talk about ambition and what that actually means. We talk about working hard versus working smart, and even what that means in the context of raising children. We discuss the book which Jason is writing, which is called Quietly Crushing It, while diving into practical tools and frameworks, including examples that can help folks struggling with burnout or finding meaning in their careers to unlock more enjoyment and fulfillment without changing jobs. I hope you enjoy my conversation today with Jason Silver. Hey, Jason, thank you so much for joining me today on Actualize.
Thanks, Rob. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Wanted to start off with a little bit about your career up until this point and your journey in the workplace and sort of how you got to this point. And maybe we'll start with quick view on what you're working on right now and how you got to this point. Yeah.
Happy to. So we zip all the way back, engineer by training, undergrad, graduate degrees in engineering, thought I'm going to be pretty technical, learned pretty quickly once I got into engineering that I was really attracted to the problem solving aspects, but a little bit less to the deep technical stuff. Like some people just love going deep on tech and all the power to them. It wasn't me. But I was very interested in how you build a company around an idea or a piece of technology or something like that. And did the first entrepreneurial thing that I could think of at the time. I didn't want to go and get an MBA. I found a startup, told them I wanted to work in business development, told them I had nothing on paper that says I could do that. Managed to convince them to let me come in and work for free for a bit. If it didn't work out, no harm, no foul. If it did, we'll see where it goes. It wound up going great. I got very lucky. I got kind of an on-the-job MBA. And I had a software company on the side. It wasn't really a company. Actually, it was like a hobby. And I decided, hey, blissful ignorance, let's go start a company. So started my first company, had a great time, hit a single or a double. It was no Google, though few companies are. And I wanted to go bigger. And my business partner at the time wanted to have it as more of a lifestyle business. And so we split very amicably, founded my first venture-backed company, a couple of years, built that up and crashed it. So I got to experience what unmitigated startup failure feels like, which might be either a chat for now or a chat for another time. Mm-hmm. And when my confidence was at an all-time low, I got really lucky again. After crashing the company, a couple of weeks or a few months or something went by, and one of my investors whose money I almost entirely lost, he calls me up one day. Hey, Jay, there's this team. You might want to meet with them. I think you like what they're up to. Turns out it's the folks from Airbnb. And I joined there in the early days of that company. So I got to experience what a few hundred people to many thousands feels like. Had my first kid on the way. I was on an airplane, folks all over the place on my team. Did the only thing that felt normal to me. I was like, great, I need to be in India. I'm going to be in jump to a very early stage startup. I'm talking like slide deck, half a financial model, no product. So I joined there. I was a COO. It's called Integrate AI. I built that up over a little while and then decided I really wanted to focus on helping other people build their companies, which is what I do now. I'm an advisor for executives, founders, leadership teams, helping them really think about how to build companies that people genuinely love working for. I'm writing a book right now, which is keeping me very busy. It's challenging, love it, though. It's called Quietly Crushing It. It's all about how to unlock bigger impact at work with less burnout in your life. I've written the manuscript, which is fun. I'm working with one of the editors from Atomic Habits on getting the book done, which is really great. Just launched a new newsletter around content, which is fun too. And that's the grab bag of stuff.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for the context. So just to reiterate, right now, your focus is working with companies and helping them to create companies that people love working for. And at the same time, you've already done first draft of this book. It's not yet released yet, but it's all about not having people burn out in their careers, which is definitely going to be a big topic of our chat right now. Because, during COVID, I think burnout became more prevalent and now it doesn't seem to have gone away. And not that COVID is gone, but we're a few years into it. And before we chat about the burnout stuff and, what you've researched and what you're writing about, I wanted to ask a little bit of a deeper question about your own pivot in your career and essentially your own ambition. Like, you strike me as someone that's super ambitious, or at least was for a period of time. And something that I've been thinking a lot about is ambition and like what it means to different people. And I'd love to get your take on ambition for yourself and what you've learned about ambition for other people as well.
Deep questions for sure. Hard to comment for other people, but kind of watching other people go through their journey, helping that is insightful for sure. It's funny the way you worded it. Like, I've actually had people ask me questions point blank, like, what happened, man? You used to be so ambitious. And what's interesting is I don't feel that my ambition has changed at all. The way that I interact with my ambition is very different. I don't think in my life I have ever been more impactful with a unit of time than I am right now. So my ambition is like sky high. Like, I'm doing a lot right now. It's like sometimes when I stop and actually look back at like all the things I have going on, like, geez, this is like a lot of stuff. But figuring out a way to do that in a way where it's like a positive driver in my life and not a drain, which it used to be for me, is the thing that it's the code I've been trying to crack and what I'm trying to write about and what I'm working with folks on. And so it's less about like reducing ambition and it's more about like relearning how to operate with the ambition. Because for ambitious folks, at least for myself, if you told me to just care about doing less, it never computed for me. It was never like, oh, great, I'm just going to take what I want to accomplish and I'll chop off the top 40% and that's going to feel good for me. Like, the drive is always there. Trying to find ways to still think about everything I want to do, but change the way I'm trying to approach it is really what has been my journey over the last couple of years. And I think what I would say I really learned is I have this idea that like, I always had this ambition. I had to learn my intention. And I think when you have ambition without intention, it winds up creating a lot of tension. The tension between like what you accomplish, what you thought you wanted to accomplish, and like what it feels like when you actually make it happen. And when you're doing it on purpose, you kind of learn, you iterate as you go, maybe you make mistakes, but you're kind of working with clarity towards, I'm doing this and this is why, and this is how it fits into my life. When you don't have the intention and you just have the unbridled ambition, I think that's when you can wind up in a situation where you might regret it. Even if you accomplish the things you want to accomplish, you might regret how you got there, what it took, etc., if you didn't have the intention up front. And that was kind of the big learning for me, is the ambition's always been easy and clear. The intention behind it, why do I want these things? Why do they mean these things to me? That was always the hard thing to unpack. And I put a lot more attention towards the intention than I ever really used to.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think about the intention quite a bit, and I've had a couple other really interesting conversations about the intention. You mentioned that sometimes the intention isn't clear. I'm curious if it's not, this is a mental health podcast and therapy, but I'm curious if you think about the intention being sort of always there, but maybe not conscious. Like, is it a subconscious? Like, if you are ambitious, but you don't know why, do you think there is a reason, but you just don't know it yet? Like, maybe it stems from how you're brought up or watching your parents succeed, or like
Mm.
what you heard going to school and all those things. Like, people just ambitious out of the womb, or do they learn it even if it's not in their awareness?
Yeah, it's funny, we were talking about like nature versus nurture, earlier, and like hard to know. A big thing for me was I went through like a crazy period of experimentation. I still have it, but I was ramped up before where like I would be running every 2 weeks. I had probably 2 or 3 tests going, like experiments on myself going against like my own kind of positive psychology. And I was really trying to unpack this for myself. And part of that for me was just like reading everything I get my hands on. I read a lot of stuff on like evolution. How does the brain work? How did we get here? Not being a scientist myself, it's hard to know. The thing I learned about myself is it's in there. And I could try to fight it or channel it in the right way. It's hard for me to think about how am I just let go of the ambition in my life. It's hard for me personally. And as I really tried to unpack it, I started to think about, okay, I'm trying to accomplish this thing. And to your point, I might not know why, but then that gets added to my list of ambitions. I want to write a book. It feels important to me. I can't put my finger on why it is, but I'm writing and I'm writing and I'm writing and I'm putting the time and energy into it. And I'm still not quite sure why I'm trying to accomplish this thing. Therefore, I'm going to intentionally try to figure it out as I go. What is it that I like about this thing? One of them is it's given me an opportunity to talk to folks like you on podcasts, which I really love. I love meeting new people, and it's a great way to meet new people. Hey, I'm writing this book. It's about these things. Is that interesting to you? Wow, that's cool. Let's talk. Like, it's become a great avenue for that. Could I have predicted this in advance of writing the book? Frankly, no, I don't think so. It's more about just, I put a lot of, like I said, attention on intention in that I either know it or I know that I need to figure it out. And it becomes part of like how I'm operating.
I've heard a lot of people that are high performers be a little bit wary of a lot of self-reflection and like deep work. Like, if they're super ambitious and they're almost afraid that like looking at that too much for like why they're ambitious will stop their ambition.
Yeah.
Is that something that you ever came across or witness in your high performing environments?
I was super scared of what I'm doing now. I was like, what's going to happen to my ambition? I'm used to being in startups. I'm used to being the person that's like raising money and hiring people and building teams. And like, for a while there, my job was a big part of my identity. It was less what I do and it was more, this is who I am and like what happens when that all goes away. And I think what's interesting is I was worried my ambition would go down as I started to think more about changing the way I was interacting with work. It's gone up. And what's shocking for me when I take time to reflect on it is I've never worked fewer hours or been more impactful ever in my life. And it's not that I don't work. I work hard. I work less. Like empirically, I work less now in terms of brute number of hours than I did in any period of my career previously. And yet I believe I'm being more impactful now than I was before. Like, why is that happening? And I just think hours is a terrible heuristic for ambition, accomplishment, all these kinds of things. Like, if there's an outcome that you're trying to accomplish, it's really hard to figure out what the thing is that's going to make it happen. And so I think often we swap the hard thing for the easy thing. And we're just like, well, just measure the hour. Like, you're obviously working hard and you're doing great things because you're working 80 hours a week. But what if I can get the amount of work that you got done? Like, if I can get to the outcome that took you 80 hours in 1 hour, like, that to me is that's just smart. I should just do that. And so a lot more time thinking about like, well, what am I trying to get to? And what is the right way to make this happen in a way that fits with my life and what's going on? And yeah, it's an interesting learning for me that I had to try to tackle ambition in a new direction. And the results were surprising. More ambition, more impact, less time, effort, and energy.
Yeah. I selfishly I'm going to ask you another question about that.
It's not selfish. That's why we're here, I guess.
Yeah, you have two children, 3 and 6. You told me before we started recording, 2 boys. I think for myself, a lot of my value of hard work, which I still value, but I think I do have a different perspective on it now. Like I work in tech, and none of my other family worked in tech, for example. Was from like my grandfather, who was an immigrant, came in. My dad worked nonstop. And how do you raise your children? And I hear that like the popular discourse is that praise the work, praise the hard work, don't praise their intelligence or don't praise their, cleverness. Or what do you think about that? Like, how are you looking at that from a parenting lens?
That is a great question, and one that is close to home. I think it's really challenging. I want to be very mindful of not sharing parenting advice because it is a highly personal thing, and like what works for some parents doesn't for others. And it's so easy to feel so much judgment as a parent that like, I wouldn't want anyone listening to this to feel that, hey, you don't do it the way this random person says they do it, therefore it's not right. I think the things that I've kind of seen is, at least with my kids and their personalities, they are looking at accomplishment. Whether I am instilling in them or not, or making a very active effort not to, which I am really trying hard to do everywhere, it's impossible to avoid. At least for me, with the circles that we run in and where we are. You put your kids in sports, we celebrate when the such and such kid wins. You put them in class, did they get the homework done? What did they get in the project? What mark did they get? Constantly comparing against the other kids. Personally, for my kids, I just think it's in them. And I don't know that I can take it out of them. I really do try hard to praise them as much as I can for the activity, not just the outcome. Like you said, really great to see you working really hard at this. That's really amazing. That certainly helps. One of the things I wish I had earlier, and this is talked about a lot, but it's very hard to like genuinely implement in my experience, this idea of unpacking failure. And that's a thing I spend time on with my 6-year-old. He's not that, he's not that old yet, but what can we learn from this? What are we going to do about this the next time? And not just like, oh God, we didn't X, Y, Z, or you couldn't A, B, C. It was like, okay, cool. Like this didn't work out. No biggie. There's going to be another one. Like, what are we taking away from this so that we don't hit the same roadblock again in the future? And it's just been cool to see as they're growing up, like he's started to talk about it a lot more. He talks about, hey, I worked really hard at this thing, not just I accomplished this thing, which is fun. And he likes to tell me this stuff that like, he'll laugh at this when he hopefully sees this in many years. But, my son will walk up to me, tell me a thing that he learned. And he goes, big brain. And like, that's his kind of expression for when he learns a thing. He's like, big brain, I'm locking it in. Like, here we go. So it's super tough. I try to do as much as I can. And I think just being mindful of it is helpful because for me as well, it's so easy to slip into like, oh, you did that. Great job. You did this. Great job.
Yeah. Yeah. So it almost sounds like still sort of praising the work ethic it's almost like it's easier to unlearn later in life that to kind of get off the hamster wheel, work. Not to say that you're instilling like work all the time, nonstop, kind of like Tiger Woods values, but yeah, it's almost like better to have that than to sort of start trying to cut corners from an early age, right?
My wife and I both really try to focus with them on like, what do you enjoy? And I feel like as long as that's kind of top of mind, even if it starts turning into like working very hard at it, becoming very outcome oriented, just never losing sight of like, if you enjoy this thing, you will do better at it. If you don't enjoy it, we should talk about why we're doing it. Right. And I think that idea of just keeping that, front and center of when there's a tough moment, are you enjoying this? Like, is this a thing that you like doing? And then when they find stuff that they really love doing, just kind of jumping in all the way. That is one where I really feel like, it's funny. I never thought about it this way until you asked, but I'm like writing a book. I've written a book about like enjoying something that you're doing. It makes such a big impact, and really just bringing that to the surface of the accomplishment's great. Did you enjoy it? Do you enjoy these things in general? Do you want to keep doing it? Like that idea and that mentality, I didn't really think about that. When I was younger, I was so focused on like, am I accomplishing the things I need to accomplish? Is the trajectory on the course that I need it to be on? I wasn't really asking, do I enjoy what I'm doing? And if somebody asked me that question, probably I would answer it in a very surface level way that was never really deeply thought out about. Like, yeah, I really genuinely enjoy the things that I'm doing day in and day out, even though sometimes, of course, it's like there are tough days and hard moments, but I don't know that I spent as much time thinking about enjoying the experience and what to do to cultivate the experience as I do now.
Yeah, well, I can relate to that, and you may not have thought you had almost the permission to think that way, right? Which I think a lot of, I imagine this is going to transition really well into, talking about burnout and stuff, because why did burnout maybe not exist in our parents' generation? Because they weren't worried about finding enjoyment in their day to day, right? Maybe they didn't expect that was a possibility for them, or definitely generations back. It just seems like we're at this kind of stage of our needs met. Well, those of us who are lucky enough to be in that place. But speaking of enjoyment, though, I wanted to reference something that I heard you say in the past, that you lost the joy of doing hard things, and that maybe was a part of some of your transition into different work. Is that correct? Or maybe you can kind of unpack that. And what do you mean by that you lost the joy of doing hard things?
So I kind of have this mission now that has become super clear to me. And the mission that I have is I really want to help people enjoy doing the hard things in their life. And the reason why is I always really enjoyed hard things. Again, maybe not in the moment, but you have a hard challenge. It teaches you some great stuff. The feeling of accomplishment is great. Really liked hard things. What I realized on reflection was that I had kind of lost the joy of doing the hard things. I was just grinding them out and doing them because they were hard. And I think if you're not enjoying the process, eventually the accomplishment or lack thereof gets old. It just burns you out, like we were talking about, basically. If accomplishing that thing gives you energy throughout, and it's something that is driving you and well-being in your life as you're working your way through, it's super important. As I reflected back, I realized I'm still doing all these hard things, and I'm putting a lot of energy into helping people accomplish the hard things. Here's a thing I've learned, a tactic you can use, and it'll help you in your job. I wasn't doing a lot to help myself enjoy what I was doing and help other people enjoy what they were doing either. It just left. And I realized that the absence of this word was the real thing that was getting me down. Is the mission's not to do hard things. It's to enjoy the doing of hard things. And as I mentioned, I did a lot of experimentation for myself to understand how am I going to enjoy better, at life, at work. I was doing, intermittent fasting, cold plunges. I was hanging for 3 minutes every day by my arms, going for runs, walking, silence, too much talking, polyphasic sleep, all sorts of stuff. What I learned as I went through that is I was not the only one feeling this stuff. I looked around me, a lot of people were, there was a lot of resources to help them accomplish hard things. Not a lot out there to help you enjoy the accomplishment of the hard things, the doing of the hard things. And I just kind of dove into that and said hey, this is a problem. I think it's huge. The more I've researched it, the more I look around what's happening in work right now, which is quite unprecedented. It's a very big problem. I want to do my part to make a difference because I think it's important.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about that right now, just what you have learned in your research and your own experience. When I look at doing hard things, the enjoyment likely comes from that accomplishment, right? And maybe that dopamine trigger or something at the end of it, right? Or maybe along the way hitting milestones, right? And maybe you can align that with something you actually enjoy, or maybe you can't, right? But what have you learned about that?
For me, you asked about some of the research and the numbers, it's 80% of people have burned out at least once in their job. 77% of people are disengaged, at their jobs today. Productivity is at an all-time low. It just, work isn't working. That's what it feels like to me as I talk to people and you do the research, is what it looks like to me. And what I feel is really missing is a lot of conventional wisdoms wisdom, things that you think would make sense. There's actually been really great experiments run unintentionally that has given us some really interesting information. So when I say experiment, I don't mean a bunch of psychologists pulled people into a lab and like observed them or made them fill out a survey. It's just coming out of the pandemic, it was set up this way. Again, not on purpose, just with the bet of looking back. And the two that come most to mind is if you're not feeling great at what you're doing, conventional wisdom says, go get another job. A lot of people did that. It's called the Great Resignation. Millions of people went and got new jobs. And if you ask them now, 80% of those people will tell you that they're regretting their decision to make this change. So just getting another job is not going to solve the problem for you. The second big one is quiet quitting. It's all over the place. We talk about it everywhere. That's where you do like the minimum possible not to get fired. You're pulling back at work to get more time for things in the rest of your life. And this is the conventional wisdom of work-life balance, right? If you spend less time working and more time on life, things will feel better. The challenge with this one, this doesn't seem to be bearing out in what's happening for folks. Something like 80% of folks around the world are quiet quitting in some way, shape, or form. Yet 65% of people will say that they're struggling in their lives. So you're getting more time for the rest of your life, but that's not leading to the ultimate goal, which is like overall well-being. And when I look at that, the thing that I kind of take away is the things we're trying aren't working. We need to try something new. And it's really unsexy, but the answer I think is there is it's not about what job you do or how long you spend doing it. It's actually about the day-to-day. It's like the day-to-day in the moment stuff that really has such a humongous impact on how you're feeling. And we spend so much time doing quarterly reviews or performance reviews or looking back on the last 6 months or 3 months. How much time do you spend thinking about what you did yesterday? And how much of those things you actually enjoy? Like break it down to the activity level. Look at what's coming up tomorrow. What things do you have to do tomorrow? Are you doing them in ways that you actually enjoy? And it feels a little bit unsexy. Getting a new job is this big moment, but taking a task that you have to do that you usually hate and finding a way to do it in a way that you enjoy a little bit more, and then a little bit more next week and a little bit more the week after. That's the thing that's going to lead to like really lasting positive change for you. Because if you just jump and get a new job, eventually the way that you work, the honeymoon period will be over. You're going to settle into old patterns, and the result is going to be all the old feelings. We have to look to change the way that we're interacting with work. Because what's pretty clear is companies need people to be more productive, and people are not prepared to give up their lives anymore to accomplish that productivity. So the need is there. We just need to find another way of filling it that works for the way that people want to work today.
Yeah, it sounds like in order to change, in your experience, like, can it happen kind of from the ground up, from the employee level? How do you kind of convince your manager, or do you even need to? I know we could easily get pretty deep into the weeds here, but like, does it require a full culture shift at an organization or to work in a way that people can enjoy what might have been known as the shitty tasks of their job or whatever?
I mean, it's not even just shitty tasks, right? Like it can be tasks that you like. And the question is, how do I like these even more? Or how do I do more of the tasks that I like and less of the ones that I don't? Like it is called work for a reason. We're not going to a country club. It's not play. It's not to say that every moment of every day is really going to be amazing. For me, it's about like, how do we just move the needle so that a greater percentage of the stuff is enjoyable for you, or leveraging skills that you really enjoy putting to work versus the opposite. Do you need to work at a place where the culture completely shifts? It would be hard for me to make like a declarative statement. My hypothesis is no. And the reason why is, even if you work for a very micromanaging manager, the words you choose, the meetings you go to, work that you put together and what's in it and the quality of it and like what research you do to put it in place, these things are generally up to us. And my theory is that if you can find a way to work better, the impact will be there. Your boss will notice it. And if they're a hard person to convince that, hey, I want to start doing some things in a different way, start by showing them, show them the momentum, show them the benefits, let them see that, hey, this is really going to be beneficial, not just for, Rob, but it's going to be beneficial for the company as well. Great. Now we can build on it rather than starting from ground zero. And the first couple steps, in my experience, they're not crazy. They're not like, We got to completely change the way that the team is interacting. We have to change the way the team is operating. It's much more granular day-to-day stuff where change the way you communicate a little bit, change the way you make decisions a little bit, change the way you actually do the tasks you have to do, change how you're thinking about growing as a leader or the way that you look for opportunities inside of the company. These are all things that, I've kind of seen consistently across folks that are owned by the individual, not by the person that's managing them.
When you were managing lots of people at your prior jobs, like I imagine at Airbnb, you managed lots and lots of people and probably other companies too. Were you thinking at all in this way, or were you just kind of doing like the KPI thing, like whatever Google says to do?
Yeah, I think Airbnb is a place where I really learned how to think about this differently. Coming into Airbnb, I was like an engineer's manager, meaning like, tell me the numbers, tell me what we need to accomplish. People are a necessary condition to accomplish the tasks. But like, if it's not Rob, we could swap him out with somebody who like does the same kinds of things that Rob can do. I think I had it completely backwards. And I got to Airbnb, and one of the big lessons I had there is put the people first. Who are the people? What are they trying to accomplish? What matters to them? What gets them excited? And how do we make sure that they're doing and feeling great, that they can take care of all the problems that we're trying to solve? Metrics, goals, these things, they're all very important, but they're directional. It's like to help us understand what direction we need to move. I think over time, I learned to put a lot more of my attention on, okay, what's going on in Rob's life? What kinds of things does he like to do? How do I think about prioritizing and passing work to Rob that he is both going to excel at and really enjoy? And the more time I spent on that, the better the results started to become. And again, it's not all the time. Sometimes you got to eat, dirt a little bit. Like, we have to get this thing accomplished. It requires some pretty crazy hours and a bunch of tasks that are not going to be a lot of fun. But that's a moment in time, right? We all kind of sign up and we say, all right, let's get in a room, or let's buckle down for a week or two. Let's push this thing out. It's an exception to the rule. It shouldn't feel like this all the time. Otherwise, like, that's the thing that leads to burnout. Think about running a race. You can only sprint for so long. You're going to run out of energy. That's kind of the way that it works. And so it's not that I would say it was never hard or it always felt great. It's just I spend now a lot more time thinking about how do I want this to feel, both for myself and other people. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we have in the workplace is it's very conducive to what you go into a job or a project or a team. It's very natural to think about, what are we trying to accomplish? What's the goal? What's the project plan to get us there? What are the steps we're going to take? Like, this describes the work. We spend very little time on the experience. And so one of the things I like to do for myself, I advise other people to do is, of course, do all that first grouping of stuff. It's important and necessary. But equally necessary is take a little bit of time, some percentage of and devote it to how. How do we want this experience to feel while we're trying to accomplish this goal? How do we want it to feel? It's going to feel like a real deep burn. Like, we just have to pull crazy hours. Okay, at least we've been upfront and we're clear about it. And we know that there's a moment when it's going to stop. How do we want to call, like, what tasks do we need to do? How is that going to feel as we think about it? A little bit of intentionality up front goes like a really long way. The whole kind of thesis is I just personally, I think it's a bit of a fairy tale that you're going to just land a dream job. For me, a job that you love isn't something that you get. It's something that you practice, right? And, the idea of just landing a dream job for me always felt like, yeah, it can happen. It does happen to people, but it's kind of like winning a lottery. And the thing about the lottery is, like, you can't engineer the lottery. That's illegal. You'll go to jail. You definitely can engineer your job, and you can change the way you're thinking about working so that it has more of the bits and pieces that you really like. And the more I think about work as something to practice, like, I enjoy these things, I'm going to practice these things every day in the tasks that I need to do, the more that it leads to, like, okay, this is way more enjoyable. I could give you an example. Maybe that would be easier. I realize people can't see I'm like waving my hands and like.
Yeah. I was just actually thinking that could be helpful. I think I would imagine the majority of people listening, probably could be unhappy with their jobs and trying to think of a way to improve that. But maybe we can put an example in like, I don't know, what kind of a role would you choose? Like either like kind of a marketing or a sales role or, something like that. How would you?
Yeah, I'll give people an exercise they can try. It'd be fun to see if anybody actually does this, just to like highlight the challenge. And then the output of this challenge, you can like deploy into a thing. And so the idea here is you need a timer, a piece of paper, and a pen. You can use your phone for all of this. I like to have different things for all the things, but whatever works. You're going to start the timer for 2 minutes. In those 2 minutes, you're going to write down 10 things your smartphone is really great at. Browse the internet, lets me talk to people, listen to music on it, blah, 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 blah. Write down a list of 10 things your smartphone's really great at. When you're done, look at the time, restart the timer, write down 10 things that you're really great at. The vast majority of people will be able to blast through the 10 things my smartphone is really great at list and will struggle to even get to 10 in 2 minutes of things that they're really great at. So we know more about like how we enjoy using our smartphones than we do about how we enjoy using ourselves. And it's just because we haven't taken the time to like unpack it. And so you mentioned really high achieving, ambitious folks maybe don't want to take the time to look in the mirror. This is like a bite-sized exercise you can do. And when you've done this bite-sized exercise, you can think about like, well, what things do we enjoy? We genuinely tend to enjoy things that we're already pretty great at. And so you might write down, I really enjoy public speaking. Great. So a thing you can do then is you can look at the tasks that you need to get done and you can think about, how can I do just a little bit more public speaking tomorrow? And so a classic example of this would be, let's say that your boss says, hey, we got to produce this report on XYZ at the end of the week. We might have a person who really likes deep analysis. They're a spreadsheet human. They like to open up the spreadsheet, write down all the data. They don't really love talking in front of people. The best way for them to accomplish this task would probably be do the research, build a spreadsheet, and send it around to the entire team by email on Friday. Great. On the flip side, if you get somebody who really enjoys public speaking, probably their best way of doing the task is getting together whatever they need to get together, build the presentation, and stand up in a meeting in front of the entire team and present the results that they got because they get a lot of energy there. Exact same outcome. We got the information out to the team, but two very different people took two very different paths to get to that exact same outcome. The thing you can do is if you've done the upfront work to think, I'm a spreadsheet person versus I'm a PowerPoint person or whatever your presentation tool of choice is. If you've done that upfront work, you can take a moment to be intentional to say, I've been handed this task. How can I deploy something I'm already great at or I really enjoy doing, a skill that I'm great at or a skill I enjoy doing to accomplish this thing that I've been asked to do? In the absence of that list, we just get it done in whatever way we can, either because we're told to do it this way or we don't have time or whatever it might look like. And so just a little bit of time up front can help. And this, fun little smartphone exercise is a great way to just seed a list for you of, okay, you might not get to 10 and you'll probably laugh when you see that like you could probably list out 30 things your smartphone is great at and maybe not even like 3 or 4 that you're great at, depending on who you are, and that's okay. But you'll at least get 1 or 2 or 3 things, and a concretely actionable thing you can do is take a thing and look at a task that you have tomorrow and find some way to incorporate some amount of that thing in the accomplishment of that task tomorrow. And you'll feel just a little bit better about your day. Do that every day for the next 5 days, and I'd feel good making you a bet for a cup of coffee that like you will have a better week than the previous week.
Yeah, it just sounds so freeing the way that you put it like that. It sounds like there's so much flexibility in what might have appeared to just be like connect A to B this way, right? And the word I thought about when you were explaining that is like leverage. All these people are like create leverage and maximize your own leverage, and it's like, well, that sounds really businessy and whatever. And the way that you're saying it is like actually connects with a regular human who has emotions and procrastinates on things. Like I procrastinate all day on the things I don't want to do. And, maybe if I look at it a different way, maybe I'll present to myself.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like I wanted to maybe explore a little bit more around what you said about people really not being able to answer that much about what they're good at, and maybe take the conversation a little bit more towards that. Like, and maybe now the time that I can ask you about therapy, and I've heard you talk about therapy a little bit, about maybe your views of therapy like shifted. And I think I heard you say almost like preventative, even though I run a mental health company, I have lots of people around me who I don't think believe in therapy or try it or see therapists as being people that struggle themselves. So why should they work with them, or all sorts of things packed up in that stigma. So how have your views changed, and like, did you engage with therapy to help you write down the top 10 things you are good at, or what?
So, how do I feel about therapy now? I lack the right word to express the gratitude and positivity I feel about it as a practice in general. It has made an incredible impact on my life. That is 180 degrees from where I was probably 5 years ago, where I probably would have held many of the stigmas that you mentioned. And I think a big thing that changed for me is just like I went through a deep period of like really challenging assumptions that and if you are serious about finding a way to like do or feel better, as I was, at least experimenting with therapy to see feels like the right thing to do versus just making an assumption. The assumption I had personally was like, okay, that's for weak people. Ignorant. Sorry, they're not ignorant. I was ignorant. That's a very ignorant mentality because there's nothing wrong. Weak people don't go to a physician. And I think, the argument around like, of course, a therapist is going to have challenges in their life. They're human, like, if we have sports folks who listen, pick the world's greatest insert sports coach here. The probability that they're also the greatest individual contributor as a player at that sport is incredibly low. There's a huge difference between the discipline of, playing basketball and coaching basketball. An incredible coach doesn't necessarily need to be an incredible player, which makes me feel like a therapist could absolutely have things going on in their life that's challenging for them. Doesn't mean they can't help me with what's going on in mine because they have a set of tools that I don't. And for me, candidly, what kind of brought a lot of this stuff about is I unfortunately lost my sister 4 years ago. And I was pushed into a position where I didn't have the luxury of, maybe I'll try this or maybe I'll try that. Like I somehow had the wherewithal to recognize that I was going hard down, like down and to the right. And I am lucky that for whatever reason, support group of people around me, the mindset that I happened to have at the time, I became very open-minded to anything that would help me. Like it was just coping mechanisms. What therapy did for me was just open my eyes to, okay, this is like an incredibly valuable tool to help me unpack how I'm dealing with things in my life. And so no, for me personally, it wasn't as if I worked with a therapist to help me like, these are the things that I'm great at. I certainly did work with a therapist to help me think about my intention and like, why do I have these ambitions and what feelings do I have and where are they coming from and what can I do about them? Do I need to do anything about them? How do I sit with them rather than trying to run away from them all the time? That kind of stuff like opened my eyes, and it's just like, I look back on it now and I think, what would have happened if I had started therapy a decade before that? Like, how much different would I be now as a result of that? Can't turn back the clock, but long way of answering, I avoided it before. And I tell everybody who asks me now that at least try. If you've thought about it, why not give it a shot and just see what works or doesn't work for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that answer. Thank you. And yeah, it sounds to me like you've really worked on like your alignment of your values and what you work on day to day. And that almost brings me back to the topic of your book and some of the exercises you were talking about, and, people's search for greater connection to their values, assuming that they've kind of done some work and understand their values. And I think like, for me, my peers when I was working for different companies would always, want to hopefully align what their values are with like their employer. And, you like what you said about Airbnb, really investing in their people. And I think like that's fantastic. At the time, that company coming from like Silicon Valley, competing with like the Facebooks and all these big, super well-funded companies for talent, kind of have to treat their people in a way that like attracts talent, right? I mean, I think like most people don't work for a company like that. Maybe they don't even work for a company that they really love the product or the service or their value. And I think like what you've put together in your book is like helping maybe some of those folks start the process of like finding more fulfillment and enjoyment in their day to day. My question is more like, do you think it's an inevitable evolution for people to continue trying to align their work if they have the, kind of freedom and flexibility to with their personal values? Or do you feel like a lot of folks can really just get that fulfillment in their own, with their own prescribed way based on, some of the things that you've alluded to and like written about? And like, can you really find fulfillment working for a company that like, you don't care about their product, or, maybe the CEO is a bit of a dick?
Yeah. Again, that's going to be individual for everybody, for sure. But, I can live in a country where I don't agree with 100% of the politics and be perfectly happy doing so. And the question is like, how? And at the same point, there's a threshold beyond which, if I don't agree with certain aspects of the politics, not to get into politics on your podcast, but we'll keep it like high and light, but like if that progressed to a certain point, that would no longer be okay for me. Each person has to make their own choice. I think the option that's there for people, that I genuinely believe that this option exists for the vast majority of people, and we're just not paying attention to in a lot of ways because of like messages we've been fed or how we're programmed to think about things or whatever it might be. It's this idea of like overnight success. You read about an overnight success, like a company explodes onto the scene as an overnight success, like a celebrity explodes as an overnight success. There's not really usually such a thing. You're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. You're not seeing all of the work and challenges that came before it. And I often think that there are these spots of like the problem of enjoying your job seems so intangible, so inactionable, and so out of reach that it's just, I have no agency. And for me, like when we're afraid of something, that's okay. It teaches us not to like touch the stove. It's when it becomes anxiety that it's a real problem. And I think what's kind of sitting in between those two things is agency. If we're afraid and we have no agency to do anything about it, it can, for me at least, lead to anxiety because I feel like things are out of control here. What the heck am I going to do? When I have some agency, at least I can be working towards it. And I think what happens with a lot of folks is they feel like I have no agency. To your point, the CEO is a bit of a dick, or my manager doesn't let me do X, Y, and Z. Sure. What do they let you do? What do you have at your disposal? And if we can just get away from this overnight success thinking and think like, I have to get a new job or make some big, massive change, to just, what can I do tomorrow? What small thing can I do tomorrow to just start the momentum? Pick it and do it. And then see how you feel. You'll feel better, worse, or the same. And repeat that cycle 5 days in a row. And that's why I suggest the thing that we talked about earlier of like, string together a couple weeks of every day, finding one way of doing something you love with the tasks that you have to do. It requires no change to your job. The things that you're being asked to don't have to change. You're just going to make tweaks. They can be small at first to how you're going about doing them. And what I think that this does, at least for me and other folks around me, is now all of a sudden I have agency. And maybe that leads you down a path where you realize the things you want to do or the way you want to do them is not aligned with the job that you have, and you'll have a choice to make. You might be in a position where you have to keep the job because you need it financially and you don't have the freedom to go and look for something else, and more power to you if that's where you wind up and you choose that hard thing and you figure out how to work that way. For other folks, it might be, maybe I have to change the organization. I don't want to get a new job. I'm very passionate about what we're trying to accomplish, but this isn't how I want to work. I don't want other people like this working around me. Let's change the way we're working. For others, it might be, I got to find a new job. It's not the right place. But I often jump to the outcome there of like, I need a new job. That's going to make me feel better. I need that promotion. That's going to make me feel better. I need that project. That's going to make me feel better. Those things might all be true, but we don't need to do nothing between now and then. you can build these small tests and just say, I really like giving presentations. I'm going to find a way to speak in front of at least 2 people tomorrow. And let's just see. That gave me a lot of energy. I really enjoyed it. Great. I'm going to make sure that I do this every couple of days now. And once that gets locked in, then you move on to the next one and the next one and the next one, and it builds and builds. And that's why I was saying this idea of like, you can practice a job you really enjoy. And the more I thought about it as practice, the more it really started unlocking things for me. I'm going to practice speaking, practice spreadsheet making, do more of these things. Actually, I have all the agency I need to make progress.
I love that word agency. I really do. I think it's so powerful. It almost reminds me what you're saying is like self-care at work, you know, for the therapy terminology almost, right? And that almost like maybe we could sort of spend the last little while speaking like about for folks that are maybe unsure of like what they're feeling, like they're feeling unmotivated by their job or by their company. And yeah, I imagine you looked at a lot of data and talked to a lot of people and managed a lot of people and coaching a lot of people, managing a lot of people around this concept of burnout. Like it still seems to me, I've read a lot of articles. We've even written articles about burnout. It still seems to me almost a little bit like unclear of what it is, but also do you think someone who's, and maybe it's on a spectrum, but do you think someone who's burnt out, or maybe it depends on the severity of the burnout or how long it's been, is there anything like that might bridge them to that? Or do they sort of need the feeling of agency before doing the exercise, or just kind of go do the exercise and it'll bring about the agency? Or
cool, great question. I think I got it. Like, I think what you're saying is, I'm going to read between the lines. People feel like there are things in the way. How do we break through these barriers to... Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Great. Good question. So small trick there. Also in the book, I'm a big advocate of this. Possibly the most valuable question I've personally ever learned. I think it's really easy to look at the reasons why we can't do something. Anybody. This thing can't. We don't need to get into all of the like, behavioral economics, psychology standpoint of this thing. As soon as the word can't pops out, there's a problem. Because once you hear can't, it's a lot easier to find all the reasons why that is true, meaning why it can't be done, than try to find counter reasons to that. You hear can't from somebody else, you think can't to yourself, whatever. The most valuable question I've ever learned is what would need to be true? So for folks that are listening to this and they say, like, I was just about to swear and wasn't sure how we feel about swearing on the podcast, and I held myself back, but
I tried to start swearing just to make it okay.
Okay. So for all the people that kind of, are listening and they're like, bullshit, like that might work for you. You have this kind of a role or this kind of a company that you're at, like that would never work for me. Great. The thing I'll challenge you to do is ask yourself, what would need to be true? Well, what would need to be true? I would need to have a chat with my manager. I'd need to get, an hour to think about this tomorrow. And, like I would need to take the time to build the presentation as an example from before. Well, okay. How hard are those 3 things? And I think what we do in that situation and where I see that helps so much is when you start with can't, it's self-fulfilling. I don't mean this to feel too self-helpy and like preachy, but the alternative is you might get to can't, but let's get to can't as the last option. It's something we're going to work our way towards. Well, I can't do this. Well, okay, hang on. What would need to be true? I would need to align my manager. Okay. What would need to be true to align your manager? Well, I'd have to get project X, Y, and Z done because those are really important. Then I could take this. Okay, well, how hard is it to do that? Like, could we do those things? Well, we could. Okay, we've got a plan now. And we went from a place where before it felt like can't for probably some valid reason, because I'm not saying this is easy. You're going to snap your fingers and it's no work. Like, you have to change and do things in a different way. But if you can ask instead, like, I don't have this agency, like what would need to be true for me to get it, and get highly specific, right? So we don't want to live at the generalized level of my job doesn't have enough agency. Great. Like go a level deeper. I want to give more presentations in my company. What would need to be true to give one presentation this week? Otherwise wouldn't have given. It's so specific. It's so short term. It's right in our face. The challenges will become instead of big, insurmountable, how do I even start this? They will become highly specific, highly actionable. Like I said, I just have to talk to my boss and make sure that a presentation is okay, even though they asked me for an email. Okay. Let's go and do that. So this question of what would need to be true, and what I like to do for myself and try to, help other folks with as well, is pay attention for the word can. When you hear it, that's when you ask what would need to be true. There is such a big difference between can't, which is about possibility, which for me is about violating a law of physics. That's what can and can't be done. Or, we're not going to break the law. There's laws of society too. Can't is about like, what law are we going to violate? Big difference between can't. Shouldn't is about what we do or don't choose to do. So if you're feeling like you have a bit of a lack of agency, next time you hear someone say can't to you, or you think can't in your head, just take a half a second, remember this chat, and ask, well, what would need to be true? List those things out. It's not that every single time you're going to go and do the impossible, but more often than not, I found you will see a list that feels tackleable, or at least one thing on the list will be tackleable, and you can go and take agency and go and.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you're getting a lot of experience coaching here. Thank you. That's fantastic. One quick question aside that popped to mind is, are you going to be narrating your audiobook?
Why do you ask?
I think it'd be excellent, especially if you can bring in some of the frameworks and get a good tone.
I think you're trying to tell me that I've got a face for radio, which I'm taking it.
Well, maybe it's a YouTube video. I'm in audiobooks now. I don't know, more than I just can't quite seem to get through books very easily anymore.
Good to know. But, I'm going to make it a personal mission to fire a book your way that's going to keep you captured. I hope.
Yeah. That's also a big unlock, trying to read books that only you're willing to keep turning the next page.
Frankly, that's what's been the hardest. Sorry, it's not one of the hard things is for me, okay, I want to help people enjoy doing hard things. And when you take that and I laid it on top of the book, one of the things I realized is reading a book is hard. Let's just be honest. I know we don't like to admit that kind of stuff, but like, you have a kid, your life is very busy, you have a podcast, you have work. A book can take you, I don't know, probably measured in tens of hours, depending on how fast you read. It can be hard to read a book. I want my book to be the kind of book that like you enjoy reading this thing. And the secret to a lot of the stuff I've been writing about is they're highly tactical in nature. And if I just wrote them out for you, you'd be like, this is boring. Like you would not make it past one. And so for me, I put a lot of time and energy into like, how am I going to get Rob and anybody else who's wanting to read this book, like really interested in this idea of how to build agency in their day to day? What can I put around that? So I'm not just giving you the information to help with this hard thing, but you actually enjoy it. And you're like, I'm happy that I read this chapter. It was enjoyable. I laughed once or twice. And that has been a real challenge with the book. And I think in the absence of this mission I have for myself, I probably would have just banged out the information, and like, there it is, as short as I can make it. It's been tough, but super fun. And I think finding ways to make it enjoyable for myself as I'm writing it, because it's hard to write and I want to enjoy the process. And then thinking about the reader and how they're going to enjoy it has been a crazy challenge, but I'm super excited. Like it's come along very nicely.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a very ambitious feat but worthwhile one. And I do think that the thread that you're pulling on this topic, it's just, to use that tech startup word, the total addressable market is just massive, right? Like everyone's struggling with this. And I think it's just amazing that you're, hopefully going to be able to get in front of a ton of people, some of these frameworks, managers, employees, students, I think it's incredible. So
I'm excited to do it. And, one of the most fun things for me to do is the book's fun, but I really love any opportunities to like up in front of an audience and talk to them about like, here's a thing we can go and do. We do all sorts of fun exercises, like with a whole room full of people. And yeah, like I said, getting people laughing about something as mundane as how to communicate better with your colleagues so you don't, wind up wasting time every week on miscommunications is deep challenge, super fun. But yeah, I really love the people aspect of it. I'm hoping that it's going to really springboard into a lot of time spent talking to folks, working with folks, sharing the message, because I agree. It's the reason why I put the time and attention here. I just feel like something is so fundamentally broken, and the answers that we're trying to put in place, I just don't see them working, both anecdotally and empirically when you as well. So I hope the time is right. We'll see. But, like I said, enjoying the journey along the ways. Time will tell.
It's incredible. Yeah. So projected to be released in 2024
Yeah.
or what? And I know there's a website live and the newsletter is now live and you're giving out tidbits from the book, I see.
Yeah. So if everyone wants to check it out, you can go to qcibook.com. It stands for quietlycrushingit.com, qcibook.com. You can read all about the book there. You can read about me. There's a contact form if you want to shoot me a note. Would love to hear from anybody. If like feedback from this chat, or you want to talk about sharing some of the stuff we've been talking about here with your company. If that's an interesting thing for you. Cool. You can also sign up for my newsletter there. If you do that, you get the newsletter. That's the most important thing. And there, what I do is I basically am breaking out tactics from the book, and I share them on a regular basis that people can use like every week, deploy at work. It's not just stuff from my book. I spent a lot of time, reading tons, as I said, experimenting for myself and pulling out the specific tactics, like none of the fluff, just like problem, solution, here's how to try it. And, I throw some terrible jokes in there again, just to try to make it enjoyable. So qcibook.com, you can sign up right there. You'll get a discount on the book when it does come out. I send around a free preview chapter, first chapter of the book. On a tactic that'll help you do 5 days of work in 4. You get that when you sign up. And then you can email me directly, share feedback. Would love people to look me up there. Would love to hear from them. I'm around on LinkedIn too. I'm not fine there.
Awesome. Yeah. Jason Silver on LinkedIn. Cool, Jason. Well, it was a pleasure. Thanks for teaching me some things and hopefully all the listeners as well. And hope you have an excellent rest of your day.
Thanks for having me, Rob. Really super appreciate the opportunity, and really great to get to kind of share some of the thoughts, and hope it was valuable for anybody who's out there listening.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Actualize podcast. You can find the show notes for this episode, as well as all other episodes, at firstsession.com/podcast. If you like this podcast, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.